And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is May the 8th, the 128th day of the year. Just 237 days remain to the year is over with, and we'll start a new one. It's a important date in history. It's widely recognized as VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, commemorating the end of World War II in Europe. And we still had to deal with VJ Day. It features observances like No Socks Day and World Donkey Day and World Ovarian Cancer Day. It's also the date in 1886 when Coca-Cola was first sold in a pharmacy in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, let's see what stories we have in the news today, because there's always something going on that affects all of us. Well, a California county has found nearly 600 unopened ballots months after the Newsom-backed redistricting measure passed. The Humboldt County Office of Elections said in a Wednesday press release that the 596 sealed but uncounted ballots did not impact the outcome of the November 4th statewide special election. And of course they would say that, which centered on Proposition 50, the redistricting ballot measure pushed by California Governor Gavin Newsom and all the Democrats. The ballots were found Monday inside a locked drop box, prompting county officials to say they had been tampered with because the box was still locked and the ballots remained sealed. Officials said the error stemmed from a miscommunication over whether the drop box had been fully emptied before certification. And while the mistake occurred after an election worker didn't follow proper procedures, responsibility for what happened ultimately sits with me, according to the Humboldt County Clerk Recorder and Registrar of Voters, Juan Pablo Cervantes. So we've taken corrective action, have already updated our protocols. But the question remains, would it have changed the outcome of the election? Well, of course, Gavin Newsom got what he wanted, so he's not going to look any further than that. But this is not the first time something like that has happened. Certainly not. Well, President Trump says the Iran peace deal could be a week away as Iran reviews the latest U.S. offer. President Trump ordered a pause in Project Freedom after less than 24 hours, citing progress on a peace deal. U.S. Central Command said American forces successfully intercepted multiple Iranian cruise missiles and drones targeting commercial ships earlier this week. They reported zero damage to U.S. flagged vessels. And the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports is still in effect. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said sit down with the Pope Leo on Thursday after tensions between Trump and the Vatican. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman said the supreme leader, Mojtaba Khomeini, had full oversight over all matters and issues in Iran. Of course, you hear all kinds of stories about him. He may be dead, he may be alive, he may be a vegetable. We really don't know for sure. Officials said U.S. strikes on Iran's Qasem port, Bandar Abbas, and Bandar Kargan did not signal the restart of the war or the end of hostilities. Iranian forces launched missiles and drones and small boats at the USS Truxtun, USS Rafael Peralta, and USS Mason in the Strait of Hormuz, according to CENTCOM. President Trump said Iran will see a lot of pain if a nuclear deal isn't signed after the clash in the Strait of Hormuz. Well, we'll see if anything does come of that. Well, There's an individual that fled communism and is now a California mayor. He's honoring Charlie Kirk and refusing to back down. California city mayor is defending his city's decision to install honorary street signs bearing Charlie Kirk's name near City Hall after some liberal residents criticized the move. Westminster Mayor Charlie Nguyen told Fox News that the Americans are lucky. We have the freedom of speech here. We all have to respect that. Nobody should be murdered or assassinated because of promoting freedom of speech, he said. And after Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA, was killed while speaking on the Utah College campus last September, Nguyen proposed to redesignating portions of All-American Way as Charlie Kirk Way. Westminster City Council approved the proposal in a 4-1 vote in November. Signs were put up last week in the Orange County city, sparking outrage from some liberal residents who call Kirk a hateful figure. Well, the liberals are going to continue to carry on if they don't get their way. Well, ALC has doubled down on the myth of earning $1 billion, claims fortunes are built on abuse. That's from a former bartender who may well have cheated her way into office, according to many people. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat of New York, reignited the long-standing crusade against the ultra-wealthy Thursday, arguing that billionaires do not legitimately earn their fortunes, but instead rely on a myth to justify their status. Appearing on comedian Lana Glazer's podcast, It's Open, the prominent squad member suggested that the very existence of a 10-figure net worth is a policy failure rather than a personal achievement. You can't earn $1 billion, she told Glazer. You can get market power. You can break rules. You can do all sorts of things. You can abuse labor laws. You can pay people less than what they're worth, but you can't earn that, right? So you have to create a myth about earning it. And that coming from somebody who may or may not have been honestly elected. We don't know at this point. Well, multiple Biden officials and Bass, former cabinet official, gobsmacked with their rise California governor race. Former Biden officials were anonymously taking aim at one of their own, ex-Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra, as he appears to ascend in the California gubernatorial race. Emerged as a leading Democratic candidate in California's jungle primary for governor after Democratic Representative Eric Swalwell's dramatic exit from the race last month. His rise, though, was mystifying his former Biden administration colleagues, according to a report from Politico. 6 former Biden administration officials, all of whom were granted anonymity to speak candidly about a former colleague, acknowledged the subject of Becerra's unlikely rise has come to dominate their group chats and conversations, according to Politico. He gets the biggest laugh every time we send around a poll, the first former official said, describing the perception across the administration that the former Health and Human Services Secretary was ineffective on the COVID response, the migrant health crisis at the border, and other matters, according to Politico. He ran on one of the most consequential agencies in government at the height of the pandemic, but he took a back seat to Dr. Fauci and his team, didn't visibly lead on implementation, had to go through layers to get to POTUS, even as a cabinet member. Second unnamed Biden official reportedly echoed that sentiment and called Becerra absent from the administration's COVID response. Third official called his appointment of former President Biden an unfortunate choice. Well, there's a lot of downplaying of the effectiveness of various officials after they get out of office. Well, a very disappointing actor, Mark Hamill, deletes an image depicting President Trump as deceased. He posted a new photo to apologize after the backlash. Star Wars actor Mark Hamill deleted a photo depicting President Trump deceased and posted a new image to apologize on Thursday. He faced a lot of backlash for posting on Blue Sky what appeared to be Trump lying over a grave just days after an assassination attempt at the White House Correspondents Association dinner with the caption, "If only." You know, the actors need to understand their job is to entertain the public, not to make major pronouncements, not to lead the country. He said they should live long enough to witness his inevitable, devastating loss in the midterms, be held accountable for his unprecedented corruption. Nobody's pointed any corruption yet, but the left continues to harp on it. He should be impeached. He's been impeached twice, and the left has lost both times. Convicted and humiliated for his countless crimes, nobody's pointed to one single crime. He should live long enough to realize he'll be disgraced in the history books. I would tend to point out that the one who's probably going to be made fun of in the history books is somebody like Hamill. He goes from an actor who is repeating what someone else wrote to coming across sounding like a fool. Well, Nancy Guthrie case is still in discussion. Retired lieutenant suggests Mexico ties were downplayed to keep the feds off the case very early on. Just a couple of miles from Nancy Guthrie's house in Tucson is a desert wash, a natural drainage ditch, thick with brush so dense that you can barely see the surrounding homes, many of whom cost 7 figures. That terrain is typical of the region, carved through the city and the rest of Pima County. Outside of town, the desert stretches for miles in every direction. If you never spent time in the desert, you have no concept of the emptiness. It's like those who have never been to the jungle talking about, well, I could make my way through the jungle with no problem. I go hunting all the time. Different scenario, folks. That expanse is one of the challenges facing investigators trying to locate Guthrie, the 84-year-old mother of today's co-host Savannah Guthrie. That's according to Dave Smith, a retired lieutenant with the Arizona Department of Public Safety and a law enforcement consultant. The whole Tucson Valley is literally built around arroyos, these ephemeral rivers, he said. This is literally your greenbelt hill, only instead of parks and things like the rest of the nation has. We've got wonderful desert, but again, it works between houses, like a giant alley through the neighborhoods. Well, there's still no sign of her after all this time. Well, a new video shows Mike Rebel and Deanna Rossini on a private voting trip during her pregnancy. TMZ Sports obtained documents this week showing the New England Patriots coach Mike Vrabel and former NFL reporter Diana Rossini signed a waiver for a private boating trip during her pregnancy in 2021. The report adds that Vrabel and Rossini were the only 2 people on board for the 2 to 3 hour excursion. And on Thursday, the outlet obtained video and photos of the 2 on a dock in Putnam County, Tennessee. According to the report, Rossini gave birth to her first child with her husband Kevin later that summer. She was about 6 to 7 months pregnant during that boating trip with Vrabel. And we can't say for certain why Rossini would be on a private boat with another man, a married man, all that close to giving birth to a child with her husband, but it does raise some questions. And there's also the stories that staffers at the company were specifically asked not to share photos from the outing because Coach Vrabel wanted to enjoy a private weekend. Vrabel did pose for a photo with the employees. According to Rossini, declined to pose for that photo. Well, photos earlier this month showed Rossini and Vrabel hugging and holding hands at a private adults-only resort in Arizona. Both downplayed the gathering as random and platonic. It does raise a lot of interesting questions, though. Well, a woman who lived as a man says she's grieved unwanted body parts after her transition. A woman who lived as a man for 6 years said she wished doctors would have been more honest with her about what transitioning would do to her life and emotional health. Said she wished the doctors would have explained the in-depth parts of surgeries, that she would grieve unwanted body parts, that she'd be emotional about it. Her name was Kyla Gillespie, and she gave an interview to Fox News Digital. She was born a biological female, grew up in an athletic house, raised in a Christian home, she said. But at a very young age, about 5 or 6, while playing hockey, she realized she actually wasn't one of the boys. She was a girl and have very few recollections of that moment. She just realized she was different than most little girls. And from that point forward, growing up in that Christian home, she went to youth group and started to realize her friends were attracted to the opposite sex, but this just wasn't the case for her. She ended up being attracted to the same sex, and at that time, about 14 or 15, her parents also got divorced, and that really separated the family. By the time she was 19, she said she had begun drinking and would lead to 11 years as an alcoholic. Yes, everybody has excuses for their activities. Well, your morning cup of coffee could be making you more tired, experts warn. It's like a roller coaster. And if you're reaching for a cup of coffee to wake up, you may ultimately be making yourself even more tired. Coffee in America is the most popular beverage. 86% of America's weekly coffee drinkers consume their cup of coffee in the morning, according to the New York City-based National Coffee Association. Yet the beloved beverage gives some people a false sense of alertness by temporarily masking lifestyle habits to make them feel the need for coffee in the first place. Caffeine is highly effective at temporarily suppressing fatigue, but can often be a Band-Aid that doesn't address underlying lifestyle factors, according to Alexander Litteritz, registered dietitian in Canada. You can think of it like a roller coaster. What goes up, that does have to come down, according to Lisa Moskovitz, registered dietitian, founder of New York Nutrition Group, and author of the Core 3 Healthy Eating Plan. Caffeine will stimulate you and give you an energy boost, but eventually it wears off, and when it does, you can expect to feel even more tired. Well, each to their own, I guess. Well, two cities with the same name are dominating America's housing markets. These two cities are named Springfield, and they have the hottest housing markets for different reasons. The being discussed during Realtor.com's hottest housing market list for April. For the second month in a row, Springfield, Massachusetts has been crowned the hottest housing market in America. But in Illinois, its namesake is stealing the spotlight with a staggering 26.6 annual price surge, according to Realtor.com data, making getting it to the number 13 spot nationwide. While major metros like Boston and Chicago become increasingly unaffordable, smaller cities with deep American roots like the land of Lincoln and the birthplace of basketball seeing a massive resurgence. The two cities represent distinct market narratives. One's a Boston adjacent suburb, benefiting from spillover demand and a well-documented affordability premium, while the other is a Midwestern market with accelerating price growth points to a sharp increase in buyer interest. Well, they can say what they want about the Northeast and these major cities, but the statistics do show cities in the South have the largest growth. And on that note, Americans keep moving to Texas and Florida. But as I said yesterday, one other red state's growing even faster. Now, Texas and Florida are drawing the largest number of new residents, but South Carolina is growing faster than any other state as Americans continue to relocate across the country. The trend highlights a broader shift toward the South as Americans say they're making that move for lower taxes, which is the big reason, more jobs, and higher quality of life. And for its size, South Carolina is seeing the biggest influx per capita of new residents from other states, equal to just over 1% of its population. In other words, for every 100 people living in the state, one new person moved in from somewhere else in the country. The Palmetto State added more than 59,000 residents from other states between 2022 and 2023, based on the most recently available IRS data. And in movement in just about people, it's about income. With that influx of residents, South Carolina gathered more than 29,000 new tax filers, roughly $4.1 billion in income, which is going to boost local economies in the state as new residents bring spending power and help fill open jobs in growing industries. And a lot of major industries are leaving states like California and New York and heading for the South. Well, a substitute teacher whose sobbing mugshot went viral reaches a plea deal in a sex case involving a student. North Carolina substitute teacher was photographed sobbing in a mugshot after admitting to having sex with a 15-year-old has reached a plea deal. Caitlin Dawn Shantz, 33, was arrested April 17, 2025. Was initially charged with statutory rape, which left her facing up to 30 years behind bars. But she reached a deal on Thursday by pleading guilty to indecent liberties with a child and was sentenced to between 20 and 33 months in prison. Part of her sentence, she's also banned from contacting that 15-year-old child who was her victim. Fox News Digital has reached out to Shrantz's attorney for comment. She's 33 years old, began working as a substitute teacher for Catawba County Schools in October 2024. She was fired after the arrest, according to a statement from the school district. Well, there was back when I was in high school, there were rumors, but nobody ever followed up on them. Well, a paralyzed subway victim has confronted her attacker, calls his actions evil at the sentencing. One left paralyzed and being shoved into a moving New York City subway train confronted her attacker in court Wednesday, describing years of pain, trauma, and loss. Iman Yilmaz Asoy said she hadn't known a single moment of peace since the 2023 attack. Told the court, "I'm in this condition because of his evil action." No words that can fully describe the pain and struggle that she's endured over the past 3 years. She's had multiple surgeries and countless therapy sessions. And she can no longer continue her career and now faces daily challenges relying on others for basic needs while coping with ongoing anxiety and financial hardship. The individual who committed this, named Kamal Samrata, 42, was sentenced to 20 years in state prison after a Manhattan jury convicted him of attempted murder and first-degree assault. Well, there's been a number of instances of attacks on subways. There were a few of them when we lived in New York, but not near the level they are now. Well, one of my favorite elected officials, Senator Kennedy, dropped a hammer on best buds Colbert and Obama, suggesting the pair ought to get a motel room. Senator John Kennedy, Republican of Louisiana, unloaded on best buds Obama and Colbert after their friendly sit-down aired on Tuesday and quipped during the Will Cain show the pair ought to get a motel room. Well, Obama sat down for an interview with the late-night comedian at his new presidential center in Chicago ahead of the comedian's show ending in mid-May. Former president made veiled critiques of President Trump and praised New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani, a Democrat socialist. Opined on the state of both political parties, suggested Colbert be a better president than Trump. Yes, Obama should know his day is done. Enjoy your future. Leave the rest of us the hell alone, please. Well, on that note, over the last couple of shows, we've talked about stargates and time slips and black holes and a number of other strange occurrences. You know, if it just happened to one or two people, so-called accidental time slips could be ignored as they have been for years. But actually, there's quite a number of people who've had events like this. We talked about a few in the last two shows. We're going to start out today talking about something that happened in 1993 in England, known as the Bampton time slip. Alf and Eileen Roberts, a British couple, had their world turned upside down in an inexplicably peculiar turn of events. They were in the village of Bampton in Devon. That was their holiday destination. Little did they realize this tranquil spot, renowned for its award-winning beauty in 1976, would mar their understanding of reality forever. Interesting fact, Bampton was hailed as the best-kept village back then, and seemed as though Alf and Eileen got more than just a glimpse of those wonderful years. Excuse me. When they arrived at Bampton, what greeted him was an enchanting vision from the past. Large wooden sign prominently placed on the green, showcasing Bampton's proud titles, the best-kept village from yesteryear. The entire place was awash with blooms and gardens exploding with riotous colors that seemed to jump right out of a painting, carried away by a brilliant imagination. And the houses were coated brilliantly in hues not seen today. They gave off warm, welcoming vibes straight from the golden epoch of the 70s charm. And what's even more interesting, a previously burned map in their possession seemed to return from ashes like a phoenix, intact. All felt surreal, as if they'd been caught up in some sort of magic bubble that had transported them back to 1976. But just like Cinderella rushing home before her carriage turned into a pumpkin, everything changed abruptly the next day when they revisited the village. The once flourishing lawn stood bare. There was no sign on the green proclaiming any achievements, and no buzz of blossoms lining fences and lanes. And the vibrantly painted houses were less vivid, and akin to a cruel twist from an impish fairy godmother, their magically restored map showed burn marks again. This uncanny experience sparked interest in paranormal researcher Jenny Randalls, who took up the case for investigation. While interviewing the bewildered couple, she matched up their details against documented historical records from Bampton Village during that time period. And she noted certain inconsistencies between the couple's version of retro Bampton versus recorded actuality. Such quirks as being mixed up with about cemetery location and street layouts. But these are easily understandable. They experienced an alternate universe's version of Bampton. Doesn't lose credibility at all. There's been a number of similar stories that I've come across. It does raise interesting questions. How do you know if you've gone backward or forward in time or made the step across into an alternate reality? It's really impossible to tell. Well, let's talk about the Scottish battle aftermath in Liverpool. You know, this was a historical event that wound up involving somebody born far after it took place. A lady by the name of Mary MacLeod resided in mid-20th century Liverpool. The area she lived in was frequently covered in a lovely marine mist. And she was your typical Scottish woman, diligent, quick-witted, and with an indomitable spirit full of sensitivity. On an average night in 1950, though, something astonishing happened to Mary that would literally take her breath away. As the clock struck midnight, signaling the conclusion of another exhausting day for this young lady, found herself jogging back home through Liverpool's silent lanes, and suddenly found herself standing in front of a dreadful image from another past, as if by some unanticipated force. She came upon a gang of men dressed completely out of place for 20th century Liverpool. They were wearing kilts and carrying blood-splattered iron swords. And their features were carved with anguish and weariness, exuding an atmosphere of great effort and terrifying terror. Well, when she inquired about their clothing and their presence in what she described as broken Gaelic, the language her grandmother had taught her over long summer evenings years ago, this group of men said they were survivors of the Battle of Nectansmere, which took place in 685 A.D. between the Picts and Northumberland. These battle-scarred soldiers sought solace, a place to rest their heads and damaged bodies while finally washing away the grime from their war-torn past. City's typical hums have been replaced by an unsettling silence. No lamps bathed the pavement in golden light. No automobiles left trails in the nighttime fog. Everything felt real but surreal, as if she was trapped in one of those strange dreams when reality and imagination collide. Well, Mary's had a kind heart. Couldn't help but sympathize with the suffering of these men. She provided them with food and drink from whatever she had stashed in her suitcase after work. The men graciously nodded in response, their piercing gaze softening as they sipped gratefully from what she had to offer them. They thanked her abundantly for her charity an hour later as they bid farewell beneath the starlit sky. Appreciation that resonated through the centuries, vibrating through contemporary walls around them like songs forgotten by time. That's when everything blurred at the edges again, like fading echoes, only to show dwellings beaming brightly amidst the drenched streetlights. Diesel engines purring, breaking renewed metropolitan symphony, restarting life that had been on hold, apparently. This perplexing meeting was recounted by none other than Mike Dash, a well-known historian and a journalist who claims to have questioned Mary while delving deeper into the layers wrapped around the time-traveling event. He painstakingly compared every intimate detail shared with authentic records, revealing startling similarities. Warriors speaking Gaelic, which was the official language at the time, hoisting swords identical to the pictorial ones enduring history's turmoil. Even a location bearing striking resemblance to the historical onset around the River Tay. He speculated this event may be either a psychic impression imprinting vivid consequences on a susceptible modern painting, or a glimpse into a parallel world coexisting uncomfortably alongside our own. But whatever it was, the interwoven eeriness that evoked unmatched attraction ripped her fantasy stands, leaving you wondering what's real anymore. And I've heard a number of similar stories. Well, we got a story that came from 1897 that allegedly dealt with visitors from an alternate universe. If you remember, 1897 was known for a wave of sightings of what folks called airships. The most notable sighting was in Arkansas, at Hot Springs in Garland County. Constable John Sumter and Deputy Sheriff John McLemore were riding horseback outside the city boundaries on the evening of May 7th. They were riding along when they noticed a dazzling light in the sky that suddenly faded away. Well, they continued their ride, puzzled but not overly concerned. Was surprised to see the light again, this time much closer to the earth. So they decided they had to investigate. Rode till their horses refused to go any further. This story is written up in the Hot Springs Sentinel. They got off their horses, pulled out their guns, and approached that light. They recounted sighting a 60-foot-long cigar-shaped craft. Several men walked around the ship. Another was loading a sack full of water. Sumter McLemore inquired as to what the men were up to, and a bearded man carrying a lantern approached the police and informed them that they were sailing over the country on board an airship. And the pilot of the airship offered the two men a trip if they wanted to get on board, saying he could take them somewhere where it wasn't raining, and it was raining where they were at in Arkansas at the time. Well, the two officers said they thought it was better to be soaked, but at least they knew where they were in Arkansas. Pilot stated their final destination going to be Nashville, Tennessee. Probably going for the Grand Ole Opry, don't you know? Police liberated the airship to go their way, and it disappeared right away. By saying that they could go where it wasn't raining, many believed they were being offered a trip to another universe where they know there'd be different weather. In this other universe, they'd be more advanced, or they could be from another time. Interestingly, that in future, the time travel tourism or interdimensional tourism could well be a thing. At least it seems already to be practiced in some parallel worlds. Well, since they weren't distinguished from terrestrial people, they probably were people from our future, descendants of mankind who were going to colonize other planets or one of the space races that contributed to our creation in the past. But there were quite a number of airships seen in 1896 and 1897. I've collected a number of stories in the records I put together. Well, let's talk about the strange case of Pedro Oliva Ramirez, the man who traveled to a parallel universe in his car. Well, so much of our everyday life revolves around the mundane act of going to work, eating lunch, and driving home. Someone sometimes experiences a break from this pattern. For most people, these unexpected encounters are as simple as taking the wrong road or stumbling into an old friend. Then there are others who claim to have traveled beyond the regular limits of space and time. And for today's imaginative inquiry, the story of a specific engineer from Spain named Pedro Oliva Ramirez is likely to be found fascinating by most folks. This slightly creepy but puzzling air of 1986 still lingers around one extremely unexplained episode. He had spent the day working in Seville. He was on his way back home to Alcalá de Guadaira. The roads are familiar. He drove them every day. Signs were all present until they weren't. Found himself driving down an unknown 6-lane highway without any notice how he got there. He was naturally taken away, surrounded by structures straight out of an alien architectural imagination. Automobiles that appeared light years ahead of their time. He was actually trying to calm himself down because he was someplace he knew he shouldn't be. What had fueled this strange fire is flooded by searing heat, uncharacteristic for a nighttime journey in Spain. He heard faraway voices rebounding from some unknown source. His astonishment was heightened when one voice addressed him distinctly with a disturbing revelation. Extraterrestrials had apparently relocated him to another hemisphere. Well, he reported he drove for hours on this strange territory until surprisingly and miraculously he discovered a signboard pointing out the way to Seville, where his adventure had begun many hours before. He took that exit in great relief, which history will record as rather exceptional, only to find himself back home in Alcalá de Guadaira. Well, his adventures were recorded by a researcher and subsequently published by writer Angelo Carrey Olmedo. But if you ever find yourself laughing about how your daily drive feels like you're traveling through another universe, just remember it could happen. Remember Pedro and his adventures. Who knows, we'll be driving beside more teleportation gates than we realize. Well, in the summer of 1954, at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, an extraordinary day quickly turned bewildering when a neatly dressed middle-aged European man stepped up to the customs counter. His native language was French, but he was fluent in several languages, including Japanese. Well, nothing seemed unusual until the officials examined his paperwork. Passport looked authentic, but listed a country nobody had ever heard of, named Torred. Puzzled officials showed him a map and confidently pointed to Andorra's location, insisting that's where his home country had stood for more than 1,000 years. Well, the baffling ordeal further escalated in a number of startling ways. The company he claimed to work for never heard of him, despite his insistence and plethora of documents proving otherwise. Hotel he booked in Tokyo didn't have his reservation, and the bank he listed on his checkbook appeared non-existent. Well, the police, of course, decided they had to look into it more, so they put him in a hotel with guards outside so they could figure out what was going on. When the sun came up, the strange visitor from Torred vanished without a trace, as if he'd been sucked into another world. Now, this strange story is often told among conspiracy theorists. who think it has something to do with time travel or maybe alternative universes. And certainly there have been a number of similar stories that I've heard over the years. Nobody ever finds out where these people come from or go to. Well, here's something that's going to turn your world upside down, especially if you're a Beatles fan. It's a story of everyday chemistry, a hidden album by the Beatles, which allegedly originates from another dimension. It's an incredible narrative born within the Enigma cradle that's which is what we refer to an alternative universe as. The trail begins in 2009 with a man named James Richards, an assured Beatle devotee. One day, while chasing his runaway pup in Del Puerto Canyon in California, he accidentally stumbled and knocked himself out. When he woke up, he found himself in an unfamiliar surrounding in the company of an English-sounding gentleman named Jonas, who claimed they were in a parallel universe. Jonas had taken James since he was in the desert in a dangerous destination. He said he used to do that, but he had to take care of him. In his universe, travel to other universes is a usual but risky thing, since some destination can get you killed. The output may be at different heights. You may fall to death or leave the traveler underwater or in a volcano. Now, there are some safe spots promoted by the government where travel can be done, but some people take risks and even go live in other worlds that don't dominate interdimensional travel yet. During a rather peculiar conversation about many topics comparing both their universes, Jonas revealed something extraordinary. In his dimension, he said the Beatles never broke up. James stole one of his tapes when Jonas went to attend to some visitor at his door. Crossing that portal was like feeling wet but staying dry at the same time. Jonas said even his dog, who went with him both ways, shook himself as if she thought she was wet after crossing it. When James found himself back home and popped an alien tape deck into gear, he was greeted with familiar voices crafting distinct harmonies and melodious rhythms, but in tunes he had never heard before. These melodies bore their distinctive flair, but they were startlingly fresh. It really echoed like the Beatles growing together musically instead of diverging on solo pathways. Debates still rage over everyday chemistry's authenticity among skeptical critics, citing it merely as an imaginative fan-made remixes implying a malicious intent to deceive passionate followers. Supporters insist on its otherworldly origin, offering alleged interdimensional journey validation resting beneath our existence surface, unexplored due to human scientific limitations. But if in fact there's any truth to it, there may be more going on than we ever suspected. Well, this is the legend of the everyday chemistry. A remarkable interdimensional gift or a highly intricate hoax. You have to choose for yourself. One thing does remain certain nonetheless. Through truths or tales alike, alternative universes fascinate us ceaselessly at every twist and turn. And certainly, there have been more than one tale about people inadvertently walking into alternate universes. Well, let's talk about the Mandela effect, residual proof of having passed across parallel universes. Now, the Mandela effect is not a new science course or a complicated physics theory designed by Einstein or Stephen Hawking. The Mandela effect is a phrase we use when a large group of people remember something differently than what the rest of the people remember. Its name gets its origin from a rather peculiar mass memory mismatch revolving around a renowned figure, Nelson Mandela. Back in the 1980s, some folks became quite convinced Nelson Mandela had passed away in prison. They claimed to remember it very clearly. The extensive coverage on the news, the mournful throng of people at his public funeral service. There was only one problem with this memory. Nelson Mandela was very much alive at that time. He didn't die until decades later in 2013. Now, you might be thinking, how can it possibly be, or maybe you've actually experienced sensation yourself. But to put it simply, the Mandela effect refers to those bizarre times when your memories seem to be playing tricks on you. Could be a clue that what you remember really happened in another universe different than the one you're in now, and the theory is you've jumped across universes all the time. We just don't know how we do it most of the time. People who practice quantum jumping and reality transferring, trying to force the shifting to more favorable universes. And it works because a number of people tried it and claim to have proof. Naysayers with square minding will tell you that these are fake memories. But if you got here in our revelation of these activities, you're not just one of the sheep. Others say it proves we're in a simulation. Sometimes the programmers change variables and things are altered. Could be effective time travelers changing our past, but maybe we were sleeping or astral travel when it happened. Then when we return to our bodies, we haven't had our memories altered. Maybe for the unknown process that were protected and couldn't be updated. But there's a lot of people that firmly believe in quantum jumping or reality transurfing because it makes more sense to a lot of folks based on their personal experiences. But the Mandela effect is, I've heard it discussed many times by many people. Well, just like channels on TV, with each station broadcasting its unique show, there may be multiple versions of our reality going simultaneously beside our own. This idea is at the very heart of what's known as the multiverse theory. Sounds a little outlandish, but the term universe refers to all existing matter and space considered as a whole. Basically everything you can possibly think of and beyond. Pretty mind-blowing when we recall standing under the night sky gazing at stars unknown miles away from our tiny planet Earth. And that's just one point of our known universe. But what if there's more than one universe? According to the multiverse theory, many universes exist parallel to each other, like stacking pages in a book or navigating different web tabs on your computer. Each page or tab exists independently, but it's part of the same entity, your book or your browser. Parallel realities take this idea even further by suggesting that within these multiple universes, there could be alternate realities, worlds where you ate cereal for breakfast instead of toast, or where the Beatles never broke up, if you're into the Beatles. Well, the Mandela effect could well be proof of movement between these parallel realities unknowingly. Imagine flipping channels without noticing or accidentally landing on another web page. That impossibility is what makes this concept so stupefying but magnetic. Granted, it sounds far-fetched, although almost akin to science fiction, but there's some pretty smart people who dedicate their lives to studying these exact theories. Not just science fiction authors, but actual scientists. So what's the relationship between the Mandela effect and the possible presence of alternate universes? You've all seen science fiction movies where characters hop into another universe. It's thrilling and riveting. What if I told you there's a theory about this in real science as well? The crux of this part lies within what experts call the multiverse theory. This is an idea suggesting our universe might just be one of countless other universes out there. Life would be vastly different in these. Even exciting versions of ourselves might exist carrying out lives unimaginable to us in our universe. Called a parallel reality or an alternate dimension, these theories push us to question our understanding of reality. Are we living our best possible life right now? Or is there another more adventurous version living it up somewhere else in the vast cosmos? But here's where it gets even more interesting when we connect this with the Mandela effect. Picture, if you will, you remember Nelson Mandela dying during his imprisonment in the 80s, but others swear he passed away peacefully many years later as a free man. So how do both instances exist? Probably you've somehow experienced memories from a parallel world. The theory of many, supported by what has been learned from quantum jumping and reality transurfing, would tend to explain this. There are multiple universes where many versions of us exist, is the theory. Think about radio stations. You'll experience the reality more suitable to your level of development or state of mind if you're positive. You'll attract more and more happy realities, but if you focus on the depressive side, you experience darker and darker stuff progressively. You synchronize and your whole body, soul and mind shifts to that other radio station. Another universe more suitable. Sometimes we may have died in the other universe and are brought to another to continue our journey. Like that YouTuber who remembers a nearby accident of a car, but suddenly he was back in the car in a safe spot a dozen meters from the truck, which probably smashed his alternate counterpart. Others theorize that we actually never die. We keep jumping from one life to another until it's impossible to jump. Maybe in 2012, the world really ended for lots of folks that were into that vibe. And there are universes where the COVID pandemics never happened. But we're going to talk about more and more of these off-the-wall topics as time goes on. I want to give you an example of some of these odd cases. One of them revolves around Nelson Mandela, man after whom the Mandela effect is named. That South African gentleman, a hero, has spent 27 years in prison standing up against racial discrimination. You'd know about him being released and becoming their president, carrying out remarkable stuff till he passed away in 2013. But there are a lot of people distinctly remember Nelson Mandela dying back in the 1980s. This strange case is what we refer to as the Mandela effect. That's what it's named after. Term coined by self-described paranormal consultant Fiona Broom. It's like waking up and finding out not everybody remembers things the same way you do. Picture, if you will, somebody asks you one day when Mandela died, and you're absolutely certain he passed away during his incarceration. But then they pull out their phone and show you the countless articles confirming he died a free man decades later than your memory serves. And there are even accounts of people recalling Elton John dedicating Candle in the Wind to Nelson Mandela. Well, how about the Bologna Central Railway Station's clock? Back in 1980, a bombing rocked this station. 85 people died. The horror of that day froze time literally as the station clock stopped ticking at 10:25 a.m. And this image of the haunted clock became an emblem of citywide sorrow and never failed to pull heartstrings they were recounting. Some people who passed through or lived around would swear that their grandmama's grave, that this silent guardian of time, remained stoic at 10:25 for decades. However, in actuality, that iconic frozen clock only stayed still for 6 years after the incident. By 1986, it was reset and ticking again as if nothing had happened. But here we are, countless people could have built their last cent saying they've seen what stationary timepiece way past 1986. Is it a trick played by shared trauma and memory? Or a recollection from another timeline or another universe? Well, from the clock, let's talk about the Berenstain Bears. So here's the story. You remember curling up with a stack of these charming picture books as a kid. All those tales spin around Mama Bear and Papa Bear and Brother and Sister Bear. Well, without taking out your phone for a quick Google search, how do you spell their name? Berenstain. 99 people would tell you out of 100, but it's actually Berenstain. It's the Berenstain Bears with a A, not an E. This weird little discrepancy has spawned quite a brouhaha on the internet. Folks from all walks and talks swearing up and down that they clear as day remember it being spelled with an E. Some people even recall teachers correcting one on this very point. But every book in reality reads Berenstain, which makes this case enter into the Mandela effect list. How about Darth Vader's line from The Empire Strikes Back? A lot of people remember that line where Vader says, "Luke, I am your father." But shockingly, what Vader actually said through his mask was, "No, I am your father." No sign of Luke at all in that sentence. But many, many people remember it that way. How about Monopoly guy's monocle? Some people remember him wearing a monocle, which he doesn't have, and according to sources, never had, even when the game was launched in 1936. Even I remember him having a monocle. How about Kit Kat, the candy bar? A lot of people remember it having a hyphen, but it doesn't, it never did. How about the Pikachu tail? A lot of folks remember him having a black tail's end, but it's actually fully yellow. The picture of Dorian Gray. That's a book that's been around for as far as I can remember. Do you know the real name of the book is The Picture of Dorian Gray? So many people remember it as being the portrait of Dorian Gray. The French edition is La Portrait. To be fair, if you search on Amazon, and even some of the English editions have the word portrait, but those with the word picture appears in 3-1 to those with portrait. Well, the point I'm making with all this is so many things that we deal with on a daily basis are not what we actually remember them to be, similar to the Mandela effect. And you have to wonder how that could be. There's a line from Snow White when the evil queen is talking to her magic mirror. Most folks remember, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" She really said, "Magic mirror on the wall." It may seem like a very minor discrepancy, but it's still bizarre that so many people remember it one way and so many others remember it another. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show and the end of the week. We'll have a new topic on Monday. But until then, as you go about your weekend, keep a close eye on what's around you. You never know what you're going to see. Well, until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a true great weekend.